Hey everyone, today we are going to look into something related to JavaScript and HTML, and we are actually going to build the tree structure or the binary tree structure using pure HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Let's go. So first of all, we are going to start with creating a folder. So let's call it JS binary tree. And we are just going to create a folder here. And then we are going to open this folder into our VS Code. But it depends on you. You can essentially use any particular code editor that you want. So now that we have this code editor opened, I'm going to quickly go ahead and open this. And now what we'll do is that we are going to first create an index.html and some files as well. So we can say index.html here, and then we are going to create, let's say, a script.js. We'll also create another file called style.css, and that's going to be it. With VS Code, you can simply type exclamation, and that essentially creates a whole HTML file for you, which is amazing. So I'm going to just save this now. The title is going to be JS binary tree. And then what we are going to start with, essentially, it's inside the body. We are going to have a container. Inside the container, we are going to have a class called tree. And inside that, we are going to have another class called node. And we are also going to give it the class node dash dash root. And this is for identifying which is the topmost element and which is not the topmost element. Now that we have this, actually, what we are going to do is we are going to write some styles out of it. But even before so, let's open this. So I'm already using an extension called live preview, and that essentially allows you to open live server either within the VS Code or into external browser. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just press Control Shift P, or on Mac it would be Command Shift P. Then you can search live preview, and you can see that it says show live preview internal browser. So let's try this out. Now that we have the HTML written, let's try to essentially create something. So I'm going to say, let's say this is going to be h2. So we're going to say JS binary tree, just to have that out there. Now I'm also going to include Bootstrap into this project just to make this a bit better. So I'm quickly going to go to bootstrapcdn.com, and here I can pick the latest CSS, and we have the HTML tag here. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to my code, and into the head just before the title, I'm going to add this. So we have the Bootstrap now included. You can see the font automatically changed, and we also have the container class being applied. So if I kind of increase this, that the content is still in the middle. It's not bound to the walls, which is amazing. So now that we have this, let's actually add some data. So we are first going to add our script. So we are going to say script source, and here we can provide the script as script.js. So this is going to be included. We can quickly test this out by just saying something like alert, and here we can say test. And once we do so and refresh, I don't think it does that in the internal browser. At least it just shows the preview, right? And we don't have a console as well, or do we have it? Open DevTools panel. All right, so we have this here at the very right side. So maybe we can use this essentially. So let's see, if I open this up a bit, close this, and if I say console.log, yeah, so you see that we essentially get this. If I refresh, we see the live console logs. All right, so I think we are doing good there. Now it's probably not going to be the best way of seeing the logs here, but it still works. Maybe you will find it interesting, and perhaps you will share this as well. But anyways, I'm gonna close this for now, or at least minimize this to some extent. Now what we are going to do is that we are going to implement the data for it. So I'm going to quickly copy the data. So I have this now. First I'm going to create a function that I'm going to call main. So const main equals, and then this. So I'm going to close the dev tools. We don't need that right now. I'm going to call the main function from here. I'm also going to have another function called get tree data, and then this is essentially going to return a hard-coded JSON for us, which is this. So you see that if we talk about the data structure of this tree data, since this is a binary tree, it's going to have an element which is going to be the value of the node. So this consists of a lot of nodes. So each node will have an element, a left and a right. There could be possibilities where we don't have the left and right at all, so that's fine essentially. But even the left item is a node, so that also contains an element, a left and right, and this can also be further nested as well. So this is just a simple tree data that we are using right now. We're going to use this tree data to construct HTML elements that we can use later on, show that on the UI. So first of all, even before using this data, what I want to do is I want to go to my HTML, and inside the node element, which is the node root, I want to paste this code with the dummy data. So you can see that we got this main, we got main1, main1, main2. Let's actually rename this to, let's say, child1 or left child, and then we can call this the right child. Now the fun part would begin, because now we are going to start styling this into a tree. So first of all, this container element that we have, we can, or essentially this tree element, we're going to make this sort of in a way that every content inside or the whole tree is at the very center. So we are going to essentially start by going to the CSS here. This should be here. So we're going to say tree, and then this is going to be a display of flex, and then we would have this style also being imported into index.html, because we are not doing that yet. So we are going to say something like link, and then you'll see that we have link href or link css here. So then it's importing the style css from right here, and I think we are good. So all we need to do is just to give this style css. And now if I save this, let's see if our styles are being applied. So we got this tree. The console log of CSS is background color red, and when we check this, we can easily identify if everything is working. So cool. So now that we got this, we need to make sure that the justify content of this is centered, but also I think that's pretty much it. This tree is also have a margin of top, let's say 30 pixels, so that's gonna work well as well. Now let's try the nodes and the content within those nodes. First of all, let me explain to you what is our index.html here and what is the structure of each node in the tree. So each node, when it comes to HTML, has first of all the node itself, which is the outer container of this node. Then we have the element, which has the value of the node. Then we have a bottom line. So what would happen is that we would have this as a circle, and then there would be a line coming from it. Then we have the children's div, which contains further nodes and whatnot, and this is going to be the structure of every node that we create. Okay, now let's start styling this. So we're going to keep actually this pretty simple. First of all, we are going to say this node itself is going to be a display flex, but as soon as we try to do that, you can see that the main left child and right child, they are kind of coming together, because that's what this node is doing. So instead of having this as a flex direction row, we need to define the flex direction to be column, and now you see that they're on top of each other. So main, then left child, then right child. Now this left and right child should actually be like left and right to each other. It shouldn't be top and bottom, which means that they should not be side by side but above each other, above or below, whatever. So we are going to say this node element or node children, which is essentially this second HTML, which is this node children. So what we are going to say here is that this is going to be a display flex as well, which makes it left and right, as you can see here. But now you see that we don't have this centered or in a tree view. So this node, which is sort of the parent, which is this one, we can simply say that this node is going to have everything centered. And when we do so by doing align item center, you will see that now it's in the correct view, right? One more thing that we need to do is to give this node itself some sort of margin. So we are going to give this a left and right margin. So we can say margin, or in fact, even before that, let's style the element, I would say. So let's say we got the node element. This node element essentially, which we have a style for, which contains the value of this element, the main, we are going to style this essentially, which is this element, right? So what we can do here is that we can give this a width and a height. So let's say we say width is going to be 40 pixel and height is going to be 40 pixel. Then we got background color. So we can pick, let's say, a particular color, but I do want to pick something specific. So let's say I really like this color, around something around this. We're going to pick this one. This looks ugly as hell right now, but trust me, I know CSS. So I'm gonna go ahead and say this border radius is gonna be 50%, so it becomes a circle. Then, or we could also not do a circle and maybe do something like 16 pixel, so it is something like this. And we also need to not specify the width as well, but we can specify the padding itself, although we could also say a minimum width. So a minimum width could be, let's say, 80 pixel. So a minimum width would be 80 pixel, but then if it grows beyond that, we can go forward, or let's say 60 pixel. Okay, now we're also going to give this a padding of maybe 4 pixel and 8 pixels. So 4 pixel from top to bottom and 8 pixel of left and right. Now we're going to give this a font size. So I think a good font size for this would be 12 pixel, but also then we need to make sure that the line height is also 12 pixel. So we are going to say line height, and it's going to be 12 pixel. Now let's see what is happening right here. In the node element, we are giving some sort of padding, but it's not going to be 12 pixel. It's going to be actually the whole height. But if I give 40 pixel, you see that it goes down. Now the thing is that if I want to give this a line height, I would also have to consider the height minus the padding that we are giving from top and bottom. So you see that we have the height of 40 pixel, but we have a padding of 4 pixel from the top and from the bottom. So if we do 40 minus 8 pixels, that is essentially 32 pixels. So if I do 32 pixel, you see that it's exactly at the center. That is what we wanted. Now you see that this main is not essentially at the very center. So what we need to do here is that we need to say text align center, and there we go. Now we have this in a really good way. So now that we have styled this, I believe we also need to give this sort of a margin, or maybe not. So this node element is not supposed to have any sort of margin. So here, this node element itself, it's not gonna have anything. So I think we're good there, but we would have some sort of margin on the node item itself. So we're going to have a look at that. So this node right now, I don't think we can inspect that. Now let's talk about the children themselves. One of the things that we are sure is that there's going to be sort of a line of diagram, so we can see which child connects to which parent. So in order to do so, we can simply say something like a padding of 16 pixel. Maybe that's enough, or maybe 20 pixel. That's good. So when we do this, all we need to do is say border top, and then we can say something like 1 pixel solid and some gray color. Now when we do so, you will notice that, or actually this should pixel. Now you see that we have this line here that you see up top, but it's kind of sticking to the top, and that is where another thing comes in, and that would be this element that is called bottom line. So below each element, each node, if that has a children, we are going to draw a line, a vertical line right from the center, and this is that node bottom line. So we are going to now style this, and I'm going here and there, but when you'll watch this video, you're going to understand everything. I know you are smart enough. So we're gonna go ahead and say something like node bottom line, and then here we can do something like, we need to give this a height, we need to give this a width and some styling. So we can say, let's say the height is going to be exactly the same as the padding. So I'm going to say the height of this is going to be 20 pixel. All right. So you see that now we have equal gap from the top node for this line from the bottom node. And then we can say the width of this is going to be 1 pixel. And then also we can say that the background color is going to be DC, DC, DC. And now you see that we have a line coming in from the top to this. So the only thing remaining is these elements should connect with the top one, right? And also I think what I'm missing here is that each node that we have, we are not giving them any styles, which means that they should have a margin somehow. So I'm not sure why that's not the case, because we have not given it a margin. So we need to say margin 0, 20 pixel, right? So they have some sort of gap. Now you see that we have a gap here. Cool. We also need to make sure that these items now have a line before that. And one way to do it is essentially we give every element sort of a before pseudo class. And when we do a before pseudo class, then we can draw a line here. But then if we do it for one node, it's going to be for every node, and we don't want it for the main one, the parent one. But let's start, and then we'll improvise as we go forward. So what we'll do here is that we are going to say something like, say node element. So the node element is now selecting everything here. And then we can say before. So the before pseudo selector can be used to create something without having to create another div. So what we want here is something like this line, which is the node before element that exists as an HTML element here, the bottom line one. But instead of creating a new element, we can use this before pseudo class. So first of all, we are going to say content is going to be empty here. Then we are going to add some rules to make sure that whatever we draw there is visible. So we are going to give this a height of exactly 20 pixel, because that is what we are using for the height everywhere. Then we are also going to give this a width of 1 pixel, similar to what we did for this node bottom line. And also we are going to give this a background color exactly similar to this one. Now that we give this, the only thing that is a problem is that this will not be shown unless we have this as a display block. So if we do a display block, you see that now we got this, right? Now we got this line, but this line is being shown here along with the content, because this is a display block, and by default the position of this is relative, which means that this exists along with this, and that would reflect on the position of the next item. So the before comes before this node element, right? Inside this node HTML element, we first have before that is printed here. Then we see the node element itself. So instead of having this line behaving like a position relative, we can say something like a position absolute. So if we do position absolute, you will see what happens. So if I do position absolute, you will see that now this should be different. Now you see that it's a bit different. It's here, it doesn't reflect anything on the other element. So if I change this, you see that there is a reflection of the position itself from the before pseudo class, but now this element, this before element, doesn't actually change or affect this one, but we need to position it. So what we are going to do is that we need to make sure that we position this absolute according to its parent. So if I just start saying like, hey, give this a left 0, give this a right 0, something like this, and then do something like margin auto, see what happens. All of these elements are actually right here, somewhat around here. So this left child and this right child, both lines are exactly at the center. Then this main has this at the center, right? And this is a problem because right now they are positioned according to the whole page and not according to their node element. So in order to say that, hey, this line is going to be relative to this node element, we can go ahead into this node element class, and here, or actually not here, but in the node class, according to this node that we have here, we can simply say that this node is going to be a position of relative. Now you see that each of the line are inside their own bubble because they are now relative to the position, which means that now I can go ahead into the pseudo class and position the top of this something like this, and I can say something like minus, and then I can give the same as the height. So if I say this is going to be 20 pixel, then you see that all of those come above. So let's say if I said 15 pixel, it would be something like this, but if I say 20 pixel, that is what we are using everywhere. You can see that now these lines are being created. Now the only thing that I said was it would also create it for the top one that we actually don't want. So what we can do about this is that we can actually say that instead of doing this for the top one, do this for every other child, which means that this top node actually has to be a bit different. And you know what? We actually do that. So in the index.html, you will notice that all of these nodes have only one class, but this div actually has a node, but also the node dash dash root class. And we can use this to identify if this particular node, which has this line, is a root node or not. We can go inside the CSS, and here we can say something like, instead of just targeting every node element, we can say that only the node element which exists in a node class, but that node class does not have this class node root, then you apply to this. And now you see that this top line is not coming on this particular class, and that is amazing. Now if I wanted to do the reverse, that only apply it on the node root, then I would remove this node, and you would see that it would only apply to this guy, but potentially not on the other. Oh, actually it would do it for others as well side there. Maybe if we do something like this, then that would be the case what I was talking about, because this arrow means that the immediate node element and not anything inside. Anyways, this looks good. So essentially this should be this greater than sign, and this essentially should be the not class or the not pseudo selector. So I'm gonna cut this, I'm gonna use the not, and here this, and now you see that it looks good to me. Now that we have this, what can we actually do? We can try it out with a different set of data that we already have created. So we already have that in the script.js, and all we need to do now is use this tree data and populate that into the HTML, so we can change our JSON data and it would essentially reflect that on the UI itself. So let's do that now. So alright, so we are going to do this in a way which might feel very cool to you or very cringy. You might also feel that it's probably something like React, but maybe not as cool, because we are going to work with the strings using this template. So inside here, I'm going to essentially call a function or create a function, which I'm going to call render tree. And essentially what should happen in this particular function is that it's going to take a node and it will essentially return the HTML based on that node. So for instance, we provide a node, and a node is just an object which has an element left and right. All right. So this is the top node, which is this main. Now this left child is also a node. So if I open this left child, you see that here, this left has an element, but it doesn't have a left and right or a nested left and right, but that's just a case that we have. So what we are going to do is that we are going to do something like return, and here we would return a string template, and then we can change the value of this string template based on our conditions. So first of all, we got this node, so we are going to extract out a couple of things. This looks not so dirty right now. I mean, it looks okay, but wait, trust me. So I'm going to say something like left, right element getting out from the node itself. And then we need to say this element is going to be directly applied here. So we are going to show the value of element, which is going to be test in the first case. And then we have other nested elements as well. So this is going to be element. Now this border line will only be shown if this element has children, which means if it has a left or right. So what we need to do here is that we can say something like this. So if we have left or we have right, then we are going to go forward with something like this. Otherwise, it's going to be an empty string. All right. So I hope this makes sense. What else do we need? So here we are going to paste the rest of the code. I'm going to save this, but this code also goes inside this tick notation. And now this is where it starts to get a bit dirty, which I already mentioned to you. So here now we have this situation. Now notice this, that if we have the left or right child, then we create this bottom line. That's the first thing. And then we have this node children as well. But now we are supposed to see if we have the left element, then we go inside and create this node. Otherwise we don't. And similarly, if we have the right element, then we go inside this and then create the right node. So I'm going to cut this. I'm going to put the condition here, and then I'm going to say if we have the left, then we are going to do something right here. Otherwise, it's not going to print anything else. So now this is supposed to be something like this. All right. And what we need to do here is that instead of saying left child here, this node or this node element should have just this condition, which means that we are going to use render tree and then pass this left node. All right. So I hope this makes sense. Similarly, we are going to create this particular node if we have the same condition. So I'm going to actually copy this, paste this here, and then I'm just going to say something like this is going to be right, and then we pass the right one. So now that we have all of this written here, now you see it's not so clean, but when you know in your head what's happening, you can make it work out, especially if you're working with JavaScript or vanilla JavaScript. Now that we have this, let's try rendering a tree by using this string. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to first go ahead and do something like document.write, and here I'm going to essentially do this. So render tree, and then I'm going to give this node element. So I'm going to just get this tree data. So I can say something like const root node equals get tree data, and then we essentially use this node tree root node and we pass this. Now you see that we got something being shown here. Do you see that? We got the test1 2 test1 2 3, and you can see all of that working here. So instead of doing this, I'm going to put that inside this tree element. So first of all, we are going to get the tree element. So we are going to say document or const tree element or tree DOM element, whatever you want to call it. Let's say tree DOM element. And then we do something like this. And then we say something like document.query selector. And then we select the tree class, tree element. And once we get that, we can simply say tree DOM element dot inner HTML is going to be the render tree of root node. All right. So it's going to call this root node or use this root node for calling render tree, and it's going to return the whole string. And then we are using the inner HTML to essentially assign all of that string, which is essentially an HTML string, to the inner HTML, and then it should render everything just like we wanted. So if we save this, let's see what happens. So inside here, we got the tree DOM element and we have the query selector. Then we got the render tree here, and then we do tree DOM element and something like that. So let's see. We got the class tree here, which looks okay. But essentially, when we call this script, it could be the case that this is also not available, and I think that's what's happening. Let's actually open a browser and see what's happening. So I'm gonna go and open this here, and I should potentially expect some error here, which is exactly what's happening. So I'm gonna open this console. So you can see that here it says cannot set properties of null, because when we essentially execute this code, the tree DOM element doesn't exist. So if I refresh now, actually if I refresh like this, you will see that there is nothing on the view. And if I go inside this tree, this is null, because at this moment the HTML element has not been rendered. And the reason is that this script is essentially running even before the HTML body is created, because we have this script right here. So instead of having this in the head, we can move it just before the body ends, so this can execute when the HTML is rendered. So I'm going to cut this from here and move it around the body. Oh, what did I move? No, it should be the script.js. So I'm going to put this here, save this, and now you see that it's working here. But I'm also going to go ahead and do this, and you see that now we get the tree DOM element, and then we do some stuff there. So now you can see that we get the whole tree created according to the data that we have. The only thing that I'm seeing here is a problem is that this guy, this root node, it has some weird situation. So we got test1 2 test1 3, but where is our element? Now this node is not supposed to be like this at all. We got this tree, then we got this node element. This tree itself is a display flex, but it doesn't have the styles that it looks like. If I go to my style.css, it is a display flex. It has a justify content center. It should rather be a flex direction column, to be honest, and this is what it should be. Also, I think this looks okay, but the root node itself should have a maximum width, or every node, because you see here it's taking the full width. So instead of giving this a full width, we can set a maximum width of this. And how do we know what is going to be the maximum width? There's something called max width, max content, and when you do so, it essentially takes the maximum width of it and just uses that. Okay, so here let's see this node element, actually that should get the max width. So we got here minimum width 60 pixels, and this is going to essentially be this max content. And now that we have this, we also need to make sure this tree has an align items center, so we get everything good. So now we are going to save this, try it out in the browser and see how this looks. So I'm gonna close this, refresh this, and now you see we have a really awesome tree that we can see which child belongs to which particular node. And also I think one more thing that we can do is that we can test out some other things as well. Let's say this 132 has 2 more elements towards the left. So if we had to create that, how would that look? So we are going to go and see test 132 inside the script. So here we have test 132. This is the element. Let's say this has further elements like this, test 132, test 132, and inside test 132. So let's say 111. We save this, let's see what happens. So here now you see that this element has this test 132 as a left, and then it's creating it itself here. And now if we added another one, that would be something else as well. Now the only thing that I'm thinking here is, since this is a binary search tree or a binary tree, it should essentially show which element is towards the left and which element is towards the right. So how we can essentially achieve this is, when we have this HTML, we can have this node element which we have right now here. Instead of having this, first I'm gonna comment this out so we don't have to see that anymore. So refresh, and now you see we don't have to see that anymore. Then what we need to do is we also need to go inside our script, and when we are creating those nodes, we can add the classes here. So let's say we say node left and then node right and something like that. So here we have node left and we have the node right here, and I'm gonna save this, and then in the CSS some sort of margin around it. So when we have a node which is not node root, then we can do something like node, and then if it's node left, then that would mean that it's going to have a margin right of 20 pixel. Let's make it this way. And then if we have a similar situation for the right one, then we're going to have a margin left of 20 pixel. So let's try this out now. If I refresh now, we don't see anything, and that is interesting. Let's see. This node element or node left is this one. We already have a margin 20 pixel, and that's why. So we are going to not have a margin 20, but maybe something more. So if we do something like this, then we get it. You see what's happening? So maybe have, let's say, a margin right of 40 pixel, and that should essentially show us what we need to see. So here, because it already has a margin of 20 pixels, so that's why. Ooh, this looks cool. This looks like a subwoofer or something. So I'm gonna take this, change this to 40 pixel, change this to 40 pixel, refresh now, and you see that now we got a really cool data structure. Although there's a huge gap in a lot of these things. So we're gonna find out how to reduce that maybe in a later video, but at least you got your tree here. Now I think the only thing remaining is to highlight if we hover over an item or hover over a node and we want to see what are its children or child elements. So first of all, we are going to start with the node element itself, so we can highlight that. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to add a transition to all of these selectors that we already have, so we can animate them when we are hovering over these items. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to actually add all of these classes. So let's do something like this. So we can say maybe tree. I'm not sure if I just do tree and do transition all, and then let's say ease and 0.2 seconds. I don't really think that it's going to be applied to all of those, but if it does, amazing. If not, we're going to have to apply on every single item. Anyways, let's try this one. So first of all, we are going to say that this node element itself, when we hover over it, it should highlight itself and have a border around it. So we can say something like node and then element, and when this is hovered, we do just a border 1 pixel solid, and then we can have some sort of variable here. So I'm going to create a variable actually for this color, but interesting thing is that we have not created any variable so far. So what we are going to do here is that we are going to say that this is going to be dark, and then we have the value set to 333, and essentially this should be something like under the tree variable, so we should be able to then use it. So actually instead of this, we have this 3, and now what we can do is that we can use this variable inside. So we're gonna go ahead and and we are going to say that this node element hover would have the var, and then we provide the dot. Okay, now that we save this, you will see that now when we mouse over this, we get this value, we see this hovering. Now the funny thing is that this kind of looks like it's moving, and that is not really what I like. So what I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to copy this, and when we have this element like node element here, I'm going to actually put it here by default, but I'm going to put it as a transparent border. So now you see that this item doesn't move anymore because by default it has border transparent, but then we change the color. Here we could also just change the color to be more efficient per se. Here if I just do this, then it would be the same effect. We are also going to have this scenario where we have this node element. We are also going to just put a cursor pointer here just to have this effect that this is something. Now the fun part is that we want to highlight these lines as you see. So this line that goes up, and similarly there are going to be other elements like this one. So this line, all of these lines which are essentially in the before selector. So if I go above, this is the selector that we are talking about, the before selector. Now how do I actually target them? The thing is that if we have a look at the HTML itself, you will see that here we have this node element which is being hovered, and then we want every node element inside the node children to have this line highlighted. And this is the interesting part. So what we can do here is that first we can say something like, if we have this node element being hovered, then we need to access its sibling, which is this node children, and we do that by using this tilde sign, and then we say something like it has a sibling that is node children, and inside we have this node element. So now we are talking about the nested node element. So not this one if we are hovering this, but the nested ones, and we are targeting the before of those. Okay, when we do so, we can now hear that the width of these would be, let's 2 pixel instead of 1, and then also the background color of this can now be var dark. When we do so, let's see what happens. So now if I mouse over, you can see that all of these lines below, they are working as expected. So if I do this and let's say hover over the top one, you see all of the lines below this are affected. If I do this, you see all of the lines below. If I do this, so the targeted ones are being affected. Now the key point here is actually this one, that we wanted to target sibling. This is the most important learning from. Now let's talk about the other things. We also need to highlight this line, which is essentially the border of the node bottom line, not the node bottom line, but it's node children. So this selector which has a border top, we essentially have to make it 2 pixels. We have to do two things. One, this node element highlighted, we have two elements that are sibling of this. One is this bottom line, and second is this node children. Right now we're talking about the node children, so we need to highlight this sibling element as well as any items inside or any node children's inside like this. So we're going to highlight both of them. So what we can do here is that we can say something like node element hover. Of course we are going to say hover, then we are going to use the tilde sign, and then we are going to say node and then element, and then here we just need to say that the border top width is gonna be 2 pixel, and then also the border color is going to change to var dark. When we do so, let's see what happens. So now you see that this node is highlighting the very next line of the node children, right? You see that? Now the thing is that this width itself is being changed, but none of the child node childrens are being changed. Now if I hover over this one, you can see the next line is being updated. Similarly this one up one, and if I go to the top one, only the top node children border is being updated. Now we also need to make sure where we add another rule set here that is going to be for the nested children. We are going to say that this node children or any node childrens inside this node children is also going to essentially have the same effect. So we are just adding one node children inside, and now if I hover over it, you can see that all of them highlight. So if we see them on the web, so if we see this here now, you can see that if I mouse over here, all of these lines are being highlighted. If I go beneath, you can see only the elements and their children are being highlighted. Now the only thing that you can see is remaining is this one, this bottom borderline or bottom line, whatever we call it. This is not being highlighted, but the rest of the stuff is being highlighted far. So what we need to do is that we are going to go CSS, and then we are going to add a rule set for this line as well. So how do we target? We go to the HTML, you will see that when we hover over this node element to actually get to this sibling, the node bottom line, and we need to highlight it. Not only this one, but any node bottom line inside this node children will also be highlighted. So we are going to essentially do something similar to what we did for node children, but here we are going to replace the node bottom line. So I'm going to just copy this one. Let's see. And then I'm going to go to my CSS and update this node bottom line. And here as well, I'm going to update this. Now this has to not have the border top width, but essentially width. And this should change to background color. And once we do so, let's check it out. So I'm going to refresh this now, and boom, there we go. See that all of the lines are being highlighted. If I go down, see that this one is highlighted. If I go downwards, this one, all of the elements that we require are being highlighted. Now you see that there is no transition being applied to any of those. So we need to essentially apply all of the transitions to all of the elements. So I'm going to create a rule set for all of those. First of all, we are going to have one for node element. Then we are also going to have for node element before. So let's say we say node element, then we have node element before. Then we also have node children, and we also had a node bottom line. So once we do so, let's see what happens. I'm going to refresh this now, and you see that now we have a really smooth transition that highlights all of the items. It doesn't look as bad as it was before. You could do multiple things with this, but I think this looks pretty cool. Now I can change my data structure, and all of that would start reflecting. For instance, I could add items to the right, I could add items to the left. It depends where I want to add those items. But let's say if I just try to copy this one, and let's say if this right element starts to have some left elements as well, what would happen? So I'm going to save this now, come back, and now see what happens. So here you can see that now we got these two items right away, just like these 1321, 1321. So we just copy pasted that. Now it doesn't matter how many items do you want here, it's going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to actually copy this one and also add some right elements as well. So I'm going to say right here. Similarly, this is going to be right. And if I save this, now you see that we have got the elements on the right as well. So they actually look pretty cool, although they are quite far away from each other. We could potentially reduce the size if we wanted. So let's quickly do that. Let's see what we can do about the size of each of the items. So this item is here, then we have the children, and then we have the node left and node right. Let's actually see about these ones at the very end of this tree. So this one essentially has a node left, which has a margin of 0 and 40 pixel. Inside it, we do have a node element, and then we have this node children. This children has a padding of 20 pixel, which is potentially what is causing all of this. So if we said that this is gonna have some sort of padding 20 pixel 0, then our tree would drastically reduce its width. That's the first thing. So we want to make this node children padding 20 pixel 0. Let's see what else we can reduce to reduce the size of all of this. So let's consider this particular chunk. So we have this node children, which is taking a padding right now. Inside it, we have the left and the right. Maybe what we can do is that we can reduce the size or the margin that we already have. So look at this. This has huge margin, like 40 pixel, and then we have 20 pixels. So maybe we can reduce that as well. So two things. One, node children has got to have a different padding, and then the node left and node right also have to have a different padding. So we're going to go to our CSS, and first we do have this 40 pixel. Let's actually make this 10 pixel and this also 10 pixel. Then this height is, this can stay 40 pixel, no problem with that. The padding that we did have a 20 pixel padding, so we need to make it 20 pixel 0. Let's see what happens. So if I refresh it now, you see that our tree now is a lot more condensed. It looks good to me now because it doesn't look, too wide for my taste at least. So this looks good. I think we can wrap up this whole tutorial here, and I think that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Alright, so I hope that you liked the video. If you did, press the thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That really helps the channel grow. I see that a lot of people view the video, but they don't subscribe. So if you help the channel grow, I can basically benefit a lot more people. If you want to hang out, I actually stream every Wednesday and Saturday on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube. You can choose your platform. Come hang out. There are a lot of cool people. We talk a lot. We play some games as well, and we have fun. Until the next time, happy coding, and see this next video.